I backed off a couple of times before I decided to do this video. I wasn't sure what value I'm going to be providing by making this. Then I realized if at least one person can get inspired by my story, that's a win. So before we jump in, let me just quickly show you guys where I am. Okay, what you guys just saw is Venice. I'm in Venice for a couple of days for my holidays and to celebrate the New Year's. So since I moved to Europe in 2016, I have this tradition, travel tradition if I may call it, that I've been keeping up, that I spent every New Year's in a different city. So in 2016 I was in Berlin, then I was in Vienna for the next New Year's, then I was in Paris, Amsterdam, Prague. So it's nothing superstitious or anything. It just brings me this feeling of hope and happiness going into the next year, and I get this feeling that something new is gonna happen the coming year. Which brings me to the point which I'm going to be talking about later on this video, why you guys should consider moving to Europe too. So yeah, let's get to this. So to give you guys a little bit of history, in 2016 when I finished my high school, in India we have 12 years of high school, and after my 12th grade I wanted to do engineering. I was so stubborn on the idea of doing engineering since my 10th grade. That's why I even chose computer science in my 11th and 12th grade, so I can skip biology, because I knew for a fact that I'm not gonna work in a field that requires biology. So I took computer science, not thinking I would go into IT or anything, but I just didn't want to do biology. So I took computer science, which turned out to be great. After 12th grade, I wanted to do engineering, and I was looking to go into a couple of universities in India. I even took admission in one of the universities in one of the states in India, and then soon realized actually studying in a decent reputable university in India is equally as expensive as going abroad. So I decided to not to study in India, but instead look for opportunities abroad. I spoke to a couple of agencies, couple of people. They all said that it's probably the best idea to study abroad because it's the same price anyways. So few conversations and phone calls later, I found myself applying to one of the universities in Lithuania. Lithuania is an Eastern European country. It's one of the Baltic countries. I found a university there which had one of the courses that I was really interested in. It was engineering, and it had a mechatronics specialization. So I wanted to go for that. Everything worked out well. Within 1 month, I was flying from India to the university, because my semester was starting in September. In September, I'm already in Lithuania. New university, new people, new place. Everything is going great. Now, this is where my story begins, where how I ended up being in Prague. While I was doing my first semester in Lithuania, I started traveling Europe. My first visit was to Poland. I went to the capital city of Poland, Warsaw. After that, I went to Latvia, Riga. One of my friends was staying in Riga, so I went to Latvia. During all these trips, I realized I might be staying on the wrong side of Europe, because at that point, when I was doing my first semester, I didn't have much of a life in Lithuania. It was just me going to the university, coming back to the dorm, going for grocery shopping, and coming back to the dorm. So there wasn't a life beyond that. I wasn't able to find any sort of part-time jobs or anything, because the language is a bit of barrier in these Eastern European countries. No offense to any of these countries, because these countries are actually great. All the Baltic countries, let's say Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they're all like very fast developing countries. All the tech companies that we know these days, like Bolt, Revolut, everyone's favorite digital banking app, everything is from most of these new tech companies are emerging from these Baltic countries. They are a fast developing country, but at that time, for me to spend my next 5 years or 6 years there for a country that was only developing didn't make much sense. In 2016, I decided to travel for New Year's. This is where my travel tradition is starting because this trip was a life-changing decision for me. In 2016, for the celebration of 2017 New Year, I decided to travel to Berlin for the New Year's celebration. But before heading to Berlin, I wanted to test base Prague and then go to Berlin because one of my friends was staying in Prague at that time. He was studying in Prague. So I went to Prague, stayed with him for 4 to 5 days, and I immediately fell in love with Prague. I was like, what is this fairy tale city that I'm in? I am definitely living on the wrong side of Europe. I definitely should consider moving. I was staying with him in Prague for a few days. I saw that he was studying in one of the technical universities in Prague, Czech Technical University. It's one of the oldest technical university in Central Europe, and in QS ranking they're somewhere between 100 to 200. That doesn't matter, but because the university is pretty reputed and they had an English course, cheap compared to all other Central European countries. So I knew all this fact, so I was already considering the switch inside my head while I was sitting on a bus to Berlin to celebrate my first New Year's in Europe. That year, 2016, when I was sitting in my bus from Prague to Berlin to travel, I was literally emailing my coordinator in Prague that I'm a student studying in Lithuania. I would like to switch my university. What are the procedures? Because that was a life-changing trip for me. I keep telling my friends or people around me that you need to constantly travel if you can, or if you have the time and space or money for it, because you never know what kind of people you're going to meet or what kind of places you end up being, how that can be life-changing at some point. Because if I had never taken this trip in 2016, I would never be studying in Prague, or I would never be graduating engineering in Prague and having a job at IBM, or having good friends, people, and being in a good place. That was a life-changing trip for me in 2016. Right after that trip, I decided to switch my universities. I finished one semester in Lithuania and I was already switching to the semester to Prague, and I had a gap between the first semester and the semester that's going to start in Prague. So between that gap, I traveled again in Europe. I went to Malta, I went to a couple of other countries. I ended up doing a semester abroad in Canada. That was my life in Europe during the first 2 years, like summarized in a couple of minutes. Here I'm at one of the islands of Italy. It's called Lido Venezia. It's one of the Venetian islands. I can count at least a handful of reasons why you guys should move to Europe. To do some justice to the length of this video, I will give you three main reasons why you should move to Europe, or why you should consider moving to Europe. The number one reason why you should consider moving to Europe is education. So if you're someone who finished high school or bachelor's or even master's, and if you are someone who's looking to do higher education, Europe is one of the best options compared to other countries like US or Canada, even UK. Education is relatively cheaper here compared to all these countries. You can get an admission in one of the public universities and you can get quality education for a very cheaper price. And if you're someone who wants to learn a new language, and if you learn the language and do the course in their respective country's language, the education is even free. But in English, of course, you will have to pay a small amount of fee, but it's still cheaper than countries like States or Canada. One other reason you should consider education here in Europe is that the barrier for entry is relatively easier than all these countries that I mentioned. There's no big processes, or there's no big mark weightage or language barriers in order to get in. Reason number two why you guys should consider moving to Europe is travel. If you're someone like me who likes to go to new places, meet new people, explore different cultures and languages, Europe is the place to be. There are a certain number of advantages of having a European Schengen visa. So to explain that, I will teleport myself back to Venice. So if you have the Schengen visa, you can visit up to 26 plus countries. Just using the same visa, you don't even have to deal with any of those procedures. You can simply travel to one country to another, just like how you're traveling from one city to another in a country. Traveling, when I say travel, it doesn't mean it is expensive. Traveling in Europe is dirt cheap. So for example, the tickets from Prague to Venice cost me only $30 up and down, and that's one of the most expensive ones. Usually you get tickets for dirt cheap, up from $10 to $15. Every weekend you can see Ryanair and all the other budget airlines offering you $10, $20 tickets to most exotic cities.
So traveling is very cheap, and public transport in Europe is really efficient. So from Prague, for example, where I live, if I take a train 4 hours to north or 4 hours to the south or east or west, anywhere, in any direction, if I choose to take a bus or a train, I'll be in the next capital city. So the trains, buses are really efficient.
Having access to these many number of countries brings us to our third and final reason why you guys should consider moving to Europe, which is opportunities. When I say opportunities, I mean both job and study opportunities. If you're someone who's looking to move to Europe for your undergrad studies, once you finish your undergrad studies, you have this option to apply to a wide variety of universities inside Europe for your higher studies. Same goes for job as well. If your employer is willing to provide you a visa, you can basically consider Europe as your job market, which means you can literally apply jobs to any of these countries as long as your employer is providing you a visa. Of course, if you're from a third world country like me, you will have to deal with a considerable amount of paperwork in order to make this switch, but it does not mean it's not possible. It's definitely possible, because I proved this point by making my switch from Lithuania to Czech Republic. And one other thing that I would add to this is, if eventually you're someone who's planning to set up a business or start something of your own, I would say it's relatively easier or cheaper in terms of how much capital you need in order to set up your own business compared to other countries or continents. In Europe, it's relatively cheaper, and most of the MNCs are having their branches here in Europe for the same reason, like cheap labor and relatively cheap labor, I would say, and this ability to have this connection to different capital cities in different countries. So that is also worth considering when you're trying to make this move to an entirely different continent or country. So if you have made it this far, you might have probably noticed that I stitched this video together from a lot of the clippings that I shot a while back. The main reason behind that is I wasn't really sure if this was the kind of content that I want to post on this channel, but this video idea mainly came from one of my friends' request, which I thought would potentially help a lot of people who's trying to move abroad for studies or job or any number of reasons. So if you guys enjoyed, now I want to use more of a general term here if there are any female viewers here. So if you people enjoyed this video or would like to see similar type of videos in the future, let me know in the comments below. Until then, I will talk to you guys in the next one. Cheers.